Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Glen Powell is an actor. He sat down with me at the Netflix offices in New York City to talk about the work.
The audition process is over, you have the script.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing you do?
My process is usually understanding the world that I'm kind of playing in, right? Every character in a movie, what great actors have is like sharp attributes. So what I try to do is before I break down lines or scenes or anything like that, I go and like, for instance, like I went to an agency and I literally, like the talent agency, I was at CA and I took all the assistants from the agency to a conference room and I treated them all to lunch and then I just got them to give me their most horrible boss stories. Right? So I just sat there and I just wrote down, recorded all the stuff and, did it all in confidence. Nobody above them was allowed to come into the room. And so they just got to just kind of unload all the stuff and it was really fun and funny. So I did that and then I worked on my agent's desk for a little bit to kind of understand kind of the interworkings of like how, the inner messaging between like assistants and like how people talk. Just so you start understanding like the reality of it. I went to a VC firm and just like hung out there and that's where that haircut in the movie came from. I had this like horrible haircut. Like it came from just like seeing that every guy in the haircut, like every guy in the VC firm had the exact same bad haircut. But just like, I guess starting from reality, starting from truth. Because what you never want to do is, I think where you start getting into, especially with like a rom-com or anything like that, you start getting into tropes. And like that's where it goes off the rails. And I think that's why this movie succeeds is because we all came from like reality. I was like, oh, I want people in a VC firm to be like, oh, that guy actually, I could totally see him in this world. Like it doesn't feel like an actor trying to play something. They just understand the foundational stuff that makes this guy tick. So then you can start making judgments off of that. Like after understanding the things that people in these kind of companies care about, how they talk, all that stuff, you understand, all right, this is where the anxiety manifests itself. This is where, how they feel about their boss. So you can make all the judgments from, not from like, oh, I'm just afraid of my boss, which is a very broad thing. It's like specifically what makes you afraid. Like specifically, what are your hours? Like how much time do you have? How do you dress? What do you care about? Like what is the culture that makes this guy tick? So then you can start fleshing out a character from there.
And do you do this with all of your roles? Or or did this script just, because it's so good, not saying the other scripts aren't as good, but yeah. I mean, did you sink your teeth into that aspect of filling in your backstory and things to pull from because of the script, or is this just your process in general?
Well, as an actor, you can't do anything if the script's not there. And Katie Silverman, who wrote this, is an insanely talented screenwriter. So when all of that foundation is there in terms of storytelling, you have something to build off of. But if there's no story, if there's no script, if it's not airtight, like as an actor, you can make the most interesting choices, but it doesn't really matter because it's not text-based.
I guess what I mean is John Glen, right?
Yeah.
Are you studying up on
like
everything?
John Glen, for example, I read his biography. I went to SpaceX and saw kind of the magic around there to see like what people that are around, space exploration and something that's new and fresh and exciting and where there are life or death stakes and there's all these great minds trying to accomplish something. I went, I watched all the footage of his launch and I tried to literally, then I looked at I watched his eyes in certain things that I knew I was actually recreating these little beats from the thing. And then I saw what buttons he was looking at based on the mainframe and tried to actually know what he was looking at. So like when I'm actually in the capsule, which is literally just me and essentially an office chair, but in like a fake thing, I was trying to match, what he was actually doing and what he was feeling and like the tone of his voice and how he talked about it after. Like there's an entire debrief that they did for days afterwards. So I just got to pull from that and go, oh, this is how he was feeling. This is the things, when this thing went wrong, this is the button he was looking at. This is how he feels about that button. That's a very bad button. You know what I mean? Those sort of things. And so I just always try to start with the reality of it. And then I can, and again, it's a movie. It's like, I'm not John Glen. Like, obviously, like he was like older. He had an entire wealth of experience, way more intelligent than I'll ever be. But at the end of the day, you can start from those places. And if you start from those places, usually you'll come out with an authentic performance because you actually know what you're talking about. You're not faking.
All right, now we know we're dealing with a serious actor here. Like, this is what I wanted to hear.
All right, good.
Okay?
Good, yeah.
What do you need process-wise? Like, do you need rehearsrsal?
I love rehearsal.
So you're somebody that loves rehearsal. tell me a little bit about that, and also tell me like what you need on a set in general. Like, do you like a party atmosphere on a set? Do you want it quiet? Do you need like, because you seem like you're, you know, even for something small, you're getting into this this thing. Like, do you need everyone to keep away from you, or do you need it?
Oh no,
you know?
no, I'm not a very. There's very few times where I need to be in a certain headspace. Usually, if you've done the prep beforehand, I'm so confident walking into a role that I can be cracking up with people right beforehand and they just pop into it. Every once in a while that you're trying to tap into something like very dark or something that you have to kind of stay in a certain headspace, that's the only time that I'll kind of like be on my own. But I think for the most part, I mean, making a movie is like it is like planning a party. It's like, you know, it's like a group project, and if people don't feel close to you, if people don't feel like they can talk to you or give you notes or whatever, I always try to keep a pretty open, hopefully people feel very comfortable talking to me and giving me notes and stuff like that. And I never want that to change because it's a group activity. You know, movies are made by a bunch of people, not just a few. And I think a lot of actors lose their way because they start getting caught up in their own ego and say, like, I know the process, and soon enough people realize you don't know the process, and it's not made by one man or one woman. And that's when I think ego can start hurting art. But yeah, for the most part, my process is mostly rehearsal. Like it's pre-production for me. Like I have a couple things I'm going to be starting, and all of it is going to be research based and rehearsal based. And then once I get on set, I get to be the most fun guy on set because I'm confident about what I'm doing.
So let's talk about Set It Up. I keep hearing this thing. It just sounds like another romantic comedy thing that you and Zoey were on some other film. Everybody wants some, and you guys said we need to be in a romantic comedy. First day you're together. That sounds like something from a bad romantic comedy script.
No. You know what's funny is actually it didn't start there. I mean, everybody wants them. Zoey and I hit it off, and I always knew she was insanely talented and really funny, and like we have great chemistry, and she's just a blast of a human to be around. But originally, so I made a movie called Sandcastle. It was actually on Netflix with the same producers that were in Set It Up. So this script floated onto my desk, and I was reading it when I was in Jordan shooting. And I was like, hey guys, like I read the script that you guys have, like it's incredible. It's like Set It Up. And they were like, yeah, like what do you want to play? And I was thinking about like the guy, like Charlie, and they were like,
play the guy.
Yeah, well, what if you were like the gay roommate? And I was like, I'd really like to be the guy. And they're like, I don't know, like maybe it's like Zac Efron or like Robert Pattinson or something like that. I was like, all right, well, when you move past those guys, let me know. Yeah. And soon enough, I ended up being like the guy that they liked, the studio liked. It was originally at MGM, and I tested with Emilia Clarke. And so Emilia Clarke and I chemistry read together, and we were gonna make it. And then MGM was having some kind of problems doing stuff. There were some like kind of weird notes happening, and people started disagreeing. Amelia went and did Han Solo during that time, and so we had to find another girl. And of course, Zoey and I had a great time, and Everybody Wants Them. She was always the person that I was like, and so that all that stuff that happened on Everybody Wants Them, we were like, we got to make a rom-com. When Amelia had to leave, I was like, Zoey. And she came in and we chemistry read, and it was just obvious in the room that she was the only choice.
So in this movie, so I need to say, I usually don't say what I'm about to say on my own show. I don't like to talk. I might even cut this out, but I'm going to say this.
All right.
It's so easy for me to hate a comedy.
Yeah.
It's so easy. I'm really hard on them. You know, I write comedy, you know, and it's much harder for me to love a romantic comedy because it always veers off into that thing. And who knows what MGM would have done with all these notes. The notes probably were leading up to me hating whatever they were going, you know, in that same way. They think they have to do that.
Yeah.
So some kind of miracle occurred here, okay? Some kind of a miracle occurred here. So I need to know how that happened. Yeah. I mean, so we have two talented people that
I think we should put that on a poster. Some kind of miracle occurred here. That's great. Nobody's ever said that, but that is awesome.
Yeah. I was reading the notes, and Katie Silverman was saying that she loves romantic comedies, and this was like a throwback to to the old comedies, and I definitely see that because, of course, like one of my favorite movies is The Apartment, which she cites and stuff like that. So, but really what it is in these movies is just a craft of writing. And then if you have two people that know how to deal with this writing and bringing your own thing into it, and that's why is this rare? This shouldn't be rare. There's a lot of talented people around, but here it is, it's rare.
Yeah.
So tell me how this didn't go off the rails. Just tell me, because you read a script, you love it. You love this script. And you like this co-star. And then what made this work to the point where I'm thinking it's a miracle?
Miracle on film. I think what it comes down to is when you're making a movie, nobody can drop the ball. And I think with Claire Scanlon, who directed it, Claire always had a very she's big on prep like I am. Like we are both like, we want to know the answers long before you try to find it on set, because when you find it on set, usually it's too late. You may be in a weird mood that day, you may come up with the wrong answer. So I like to have a picture of the movie we're making and make sure everybody's oriented in the right direction. And Claire did a really good job of that. She said, we're making Harry Met Sally. We're not making an Apatow movie. We're not going for a laugh of a second here. We're not trying to just pack in jokes. This should be more loaded with heart than humor. The humor should come out of reality. The humor should come out of premise. Should never come out of hacky joke, hacky joke, hacky joke. Because I think that's where you start going off the rails, where the reason you feel like it's a miracle is people are, the studio in this sense would basically be saying, hey, we need 7 more laughs on this page, right? And all of a sudden it stops, that's not how people talk. And so you're trying to infuse humor where there is none, and instead of just living the reality, if you just live in the reality, when you get to the end and these two people end up together, you just go, oh, that felt like I went on a ride with these people in real life, instead of going, yeah, I laughed a bunch, but I didn't really give a shit, and I think that's the difference. And I would attribute, this movie was actually made by mostly women. I mean, Claire Scanlon, who's the director, Katie Silverman, who's the writer, Zoey Deutch, almost all the department heads were female. And I think that they felt that it was important, and I'm really glad they did, because it's always a scary thing. And I feel like they thought this movie was making a statement, and I think it is. Like when you have like all these females that are making a movie, they were like, "Hey, this is an opportunity. If we screw this up, look who they're turning to say that this was bad." And I think when people take the process seriously and actually come to play, it's a really fun thing. And that's why I feel like there's not as many good movies. Is I feel like, number one, studios don't trust filmmakers like they used to, and I think those notes that you're talking about, those infusing just too many cooks in the kitchen, and then they all start overthinking ideas. I think you have a lot of people that the knee-jerk reaction a lot of times is the right reaction, right? That's where it comes out of gut. Like, movies should be made on gut, on feeling, on tone. And a lot of times people go, oh, the business says rom-coms aren't testing. Could we make this more of a thriller-y thing? Could we? And you're like, that's not the movie we're making. Like, that's not what we're doing. There's actually a great movie called The TV Set, which is about, who's the guy from, got that TV show with the sex addict, Californication. What's the guy's name?
Oh yeah, David Duchovny.
David Duchovny made this great movie back in the day about.
I saw this in a screening.
It's so good.
Like a
really
preview.
Good. Yeah, it's basically about this guy
early
who
2000s.
writes. Yeah, early 2000s, and he wrote this pilot, right? Who's like, it's like this pilot about his brother committing suicide, and it's so close to his heart. And then over the course of studio, network notes, casting, all that stuff, this thing ends up becoming basically like a fart joke comedy, like a half-hour thing. So this thing that was so personal to him just gets bastardized by this whole process. And sometimes it can feel like that, where you have to kind of fight for things and just go, that's not the movie we're making. That is a different movie. What was there was an old thing that John August used to say. It's like, is it notes or is it speculations? Something like that. But basically it's like, are you giving me a note on something that is about this movie, or are you speculating on what it could be? Something else. So it's like sometimes these macro things cause a movie a lot of problems, because you go, okay, now we're orienting a different direction, and the troops are not marching in the same direction anymore. But here, like if you're saying, hey, maybe we should have better boots or better food for the troops, like that's a note that we can implement. Like that'll work on the battlefield. But like, you're marching a different direction, like splitting up the forces, and them, going to France and us going to Belgium, like that's a bad idea, and then all of a sudden you have a a tonally conflicting movie, and that's where you see a lot of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yes.
Which is, it feels like it's a miracle when there's a good movie these days, is because simply the general, which is mostly the director, almost always, and they're not marching the troops in the right way.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I wanna get a little real with you for a second
Totally.
about something.
Yeah.
Why did I stand up and notice you in this movie, but you didn't quite stand out to me in Everybody Wants Some?
Okay.
Okay. Now I don't want to diss it.
Yeah.
Somebody might say that these are the same kind of comedies. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad comedy, but I'm saying I want to talk about performance-wise
Sure.
with you. Do you feel like you're growing in a way where, like, I think that this is like star-making thing. Like, this is a classic. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Everyone's like, let's hope there's enough clicks on this. I'm thinking, you guys, do you understand how cynical I am?
Oh, that's awesome.
This thing is like
Yeah.
a classic.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. That makes
Okay?
me feel great.
So you're in my thing now. Now and you know, someone might have said that one might have been your thing. Now, but it's something about the comedy that didn't land with me that this one landed with me. Can you say anything about
Yeah.
that? Was there someone that was allowing you to take out this other wing on this? That, like, you have some other thing that you were exercising in this.
Well, then that's what you do. I mean, look, in every role, and that's why some people like performances, some people don't. Some people like performances more than others. You are getting the chance to exercise different things. With this one, Finnegan in Everybody Wants Some is very much he's very much an optimist. He's a guy that says, why not, right, all the time, and what could go wrong, right? Where Charlie in this movie is way more of he's a cynical human being. He doesn't see that love is possible in this world. He doesn't see that a right kind of love is possible. He's barely seeing light at the end of the tunnel. So again, like, I think that some people connect with Finnegan and Everybody Wants Them probably based on their natural resting place. With this movie, I feel like a lot of my buddies who are in this business, in the VC world, they say, oh, you played that guy exactly how, you know, all these assistants were, which is like, you know, they're cynical creatures for the most part, because it's always managing what can go wrong. And when working for someone like Rick in this movie, that's all I'm worried about. What's going to go wrong? I'm not optimistic about, like, oh, I did that task right, like, I'm going to get a pat on the back. I never get a pat on the back. All anything can do is go wrong. So that's where I started from with this character is that kind of sort of cynicism is kind of what fueled him, and Harper's kind of the light that comes into his life.
Yeah.
Even though she gets shit on at work too.
Yeah.
He's a guy that, like, her light kind of brings color and fun to his world.
Yeah, and I guess everything is different. Like, you know, everything allows you to touch on different things.
Yeah, so you're just exercising different muscles, and even just like the tone of voice. Like for Finnegan, he kind of sings things, right?
Yeah.
And Charlie is kind of constantly just, you know, sarcastic, throwing things away. It's they're just two different flavors. You know, obviously it's me playing both of them, but it's just, again, it's just exercising different places in your brain, and honestly, it's kind of cathartic and therapeutic in a lot of ways, is because we're not only one thing. You know, and sometimes you feel cynical about the world. Sometimes you feel optimistic about things. Sometimes you want to sing. Sometimes you want to cry.
I want to talk about one particular scene and set it up. The pizza scene in this movie.
Yeah.
Something about this thing. And, you know, Zoey is amazing in it, but she wouldn't be getting there without you, I feel. I feel like you both have something going on in that scene. And here it is, like, the movie's already surprising me. And then this scene...
Yeah.
Tell me about how you guys got to there. And the basic question is just how.
I think in that scene, when you're making a movie, you know there are 4 or 5 scenes in the movie that have to be perfect, otherwise the movie doesn't work. And that is a launching point for the rest of the movie. For the characters, that's the first time they've looked at each other potentially romantically, and not just as cohorts in this crazy plan. So the fun part about that scene was, again, like, Zoey and I are like coworkers, we're friends, we're all that, and it's a fun thing to kind of like drop the guard for a bit, and what we're doing as actors and what we're doing as characters is going, what if? And I think always what if is the most exciting emotion that you can play in sort of a rom-com, because it's, if you entertain the idea, and again, like, that's, Zoey and I are not, we would be horrible if we ever dated, but there is an element that I think that's where movies can kind of become a little bit more magical is like entertaining the idea of what if, and if you catch that on camera, it does provide something exciting.
No. Anybody else doing that, Glenn,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have reached that. I've seen it fail so many times.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
Though, so you're not answering my question. You're not giving me the magic. Tell me how this miracle happened.
I also think Claire Scanlon, as the director, directed this movie not as a comedy, but as a romance, right? And the comedy comes out of dialogue and script-based, text-based, and all that stuff. So, for instance, Claire, because it's not directed like an Apatow movie where we're trying to, the camera's not moving for a reveal or all that stuff. It's directed like a romance where the text should be the humor, but at the end of the day, we're all coming from a real place. I think in that scene, it's directed like basically, I would say, like an old John Hughes movie. It feels, it feels that sort of tone, that sort of like texture, that kind of magic that he had. Again, sometimes I think in movies these days, people don't want to linger too long on emotion. They kind of undercut the joke or undercut emotion and then move on to the joke as quickly as possible. I think Claire wasn't afraid of that in this one and kind of let us have the electricity that I think that scene deserved. And I think it's a very sweet movie and a movie that hits home for that reason, because she didn't direct it like a comedy.
Speaking of that, what do you need from a director in general for you to bring the best out of your craft?
I think it's sort of like a good director is like a good relationship. I mean, it's just communication. If a director, I always heard this. I think I heard this from Linklater actually. He said, if you're in a bad mood, the actors in front of the camera always assume that the reason they're in a bad mood is because of your performance, right? And it's true, because actors, all you're looking for is validation. Yeah. You put yourself out there, you do whatever, and if the director's in a bad mood, looks like he's not happy, usually it's not because of you. Usually because the filter's off, or like, they're having trouble with this lighting thing, it's flickering, or the production designer said he could get something and he didn't get it, and he's not happy with the scene because he didn't get the Miller light sign he wanted. He didn't get clearance on this picture that he liked. You never know why they're grumpy, but in terms of, and Rick was never grumpy, but because he knows that. He's always in a good mood, and he's always giddy by making a movie because he knows that actors can be very fickle emotionally, and that all translates on the camera. I think what Claire did a really good job of was communication. She's very open about what she wants and doesn't want. And I think at the end of the day, like, she told us like movies to watch in terms of comp like movie comps. Richard Linklater did the same thing on Everybody Wants Some. We watched a lot of movies that he felt were tonally similar to kind of drop you into a world. And with this one, Harry Met Sally, Philadelphia Story, The Apartment, Working Girl. We were going for that tone. So as long as if somebody thinks they're making, again, Knocked Up, or the director wants Harry Met Sally, you want Knocked Up, that's where you start making a bad movie, because people are acting in a vacuum. You just got to be in the same stage.
So you're at the young end of your career. Like, that's what's exciting for me. What ideally do you want out of this career? Is that an embarrassing question?
No. I got to, on Hidden Figures, I got to go to while I was shooting that, Kevin Costner brought me to a baseball game. So we got to sit and watch a Braves game. Braves were playing the Dodgers. And one of the things that I always thought was kind of an amazing thing, I have this like journal where I call it icon wisdom. And anytime I work with somebody that I've like idolized for my career, one of the reasons I'm in the business, I always try to write something down that just like that is their perspective, their worldview on the business. And one of the things that he said was, sometimes people look at movies as just movies, a job, right? And he goes, I want to look back on my career, and that was the legacy. Those were the ideas, those were the thoughts, those were the feelings, and that is not just necessarily jobs, like a series of jobs you see, but that's like a legacy. And I thought what was really interesting about that is I've tried to choose movies, like in the last year, like since this movie, I've turned down everything that's come around, and the reason I've done that is because I haven't been like fueled up or excited about anything I've seen. And I don't want to hop into spandex or shoot powers out of my hands for no reason if it doesn't get me excited. And I've never really I guess I just like a movie to get me. When I go to work, I just want to throw my heart and soul on celluloid. And when something like that doesn't come around, like it's a bummer. But I'd rather not make a movie than make a bad movie. You know. So yeah. So I think also DiCaprio kind of has the same sort of perspective. Is whenever Leo does a movie, you know it's going to be good. People show up to the theater. People want to tune in because there's a certain amount of quality control that he has always held himself to. So if you do that, then people actually show up, you know. And I don't want to be the guy that's just like oversaturating the marketplace just because I want a job, you know, or I want to stay relevant. I'd rather just make good movies and so people just go, oh, like let's go see the new Glen movie. Like that looks awesome, you know. He usually doesn't make a stinker, you know. Every once in a while you will. It's just the nature of it. But you know, you definitely don't want to have a career where you look back and go, oh man, there was a lot of bad movies in there. You know, that's basically it. That's my perspective.
Glen Powell, don't die.
I'll try not to.
I'm excited about your career.
Oh, thanks, brother.
In a real way.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project.